Welcome back to Smart Simple Fit. I'm Davin, and today I have the honor and the pleasure of speaking to Adam Ogilvie from SAF Athletics. He's a guy with a lot of years of experience, put in some hard work with barbells, Scottish Highland Games. He's actually quite accomplished in that sense. He is a biologist and a father, and someone who just believes in good old-fashioned common sense and hard work. So, Adam, it's nice to meet you for the first time. How you doing today?
Yeah, thanks, Davin. It's great. I mean, we've talked the Instagram inbox for months now,
Oh yeah.
and it's the first time we've ever talked face to face. So yeah, so thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It's my
yeah,
pleasure. Very good. So
yeah,
I'd like the audience to get a really good grasp on, the raw magnitude of your training history going back decades and, what types of strategies you used and how you and maybe your friends or training partners, how they approach training and, along the way, if you could point out some differences maybe between what you see as, popular today, the way people think about training, the exercises, maybe what you think is better than worse, just enrich the audience with your training journey. So tell us right from the start.
yeah. Sure, I'll do my best, and I'm going to date myself here big time. But so I started lifting weights in 1987. There's
Right
probably
on.
some of you guys that's like, oh, I wasn't even born I was born in 2007. So anyway, so yeah, so I started when I was 16, and really just started at home. My father had some old weights and stuff. It's a typical story. My dad had some weights in the garage. I started
Yep.
lifting them. Well, those are in our basement. So anyway, so I started lifting those, and I always played sports. My dad had me in every sport growing up, so it really wasn't. I didn't start lifting weights for sports. It was more just for self confidence. I mean, we
Right.
all go through that when we're teenagers, right? We lack
Yep.
confidence, and you may have a couple bullies in your life, so you want to start lifting weights, right? It's the same
Totally.
story. So anyway, so I started going to the gym, and really back then there wasn't this huge gym culture that you have now. There are very
Mm.
few guys, even the guys I play sports with, that I knew all my life, did not go to the gym. I was a handful of guys that just actually went to the gym to bodybuild. So it really wasn't as mainstream as it is now, which might have been, which is probably a good thing, I think, because it's it seems to have taken on a whole other form in itself now. So, but basically, yeah. So when I started, I put a post on Instagram about when I started, and just I went in there as green as anybody else, but I went in there with no ego, and I was lucky enough to have a few really big older guys in the gym that were very helpful, and I didn't mind asking them
Awesome.
questions because I mean, even at that point, I wanted to do this for my entire life. So, in order to do that, I had to not be a dumbass, basically, and right and listen to the guys that knew what they were doing.
Totally.
So that's what I did. And when I started out, it was strictly bodybuilding, and I did that probably until I was in my early 30s. I was strictly bodybuilding. So a good 15 years of bodybuilding, and I think that gave me a really good base for when I started the Highland Games. So I mean, anyway, but even back then, I didn't do a whole lot of machines. I stuck to free weights. Uh, always barbells. I mean, they're always there, right? Always the barbell free weight movements were always great. Started out squats, bench. I didn't really get into deadlifts too much until I was probably, I don't know, 18, 19, around there. But I started squatting right from the very beginning.
Were the
So
big three as popular back then as they were today, or how did that play out as you saw?
no, because again, even powerlifting as a sport wasn't really that big, at least not where I grew up. Um, now I did one competition in powerlifting in my whole entire life, and I was
Cool.
19 or 20,
Awesome.
and I still remember my lifts. I had a 375 squat, I had a 375 deadlift, and I had a 245 bench.
There you go. There you go.
So, and I was
Right
about
on.
19 years old. But no,
That's
I mean,
pretty good.
so the big three weren't really as big as they are now. I mean, there was definitely no SBD, this and that. Most guys, we just did bodybuilding. So, like your traditional old school bodybuilding movements, that was what we did. Yeah. So mostly high reps, lots of stuff to failure and all that. So
Yeah, and even when you did SBD, did you even think to yourself, "Oh, I need to keep the reps extra low on this," or even then was it kind of higher reps than what you would see powerlifters do today?
yeah, no, I mean, to me, those movements were bodybuilding movements,
Yeah,
right? They're bodybuilding movements. Bench press was a chest movement. It was an upper body movement. So the deadlift was to build your back and your lower
totally.
body.
Yeah,
And squats were of course to build your legs, to build your quads, right? I mean, they were primarily a quad movement, or at least that's what we wanted them to be anyway.
yeah,
So, and it's we're I'm sure that we'll dive into it at some point, but I think powerlifting, um, and I'll say it now, and I don't want to offend any of my friends out there, but at the same time, too bad
go
I'm
for
Gen
it.
X, so I don't give a shit about your feelings right now.
Good.
Powerlifting ruined bodybuilding, traditional bodybuilding, and
Right.
we can talk about the whys
Totally.
later on. But yeah, there you go.
Very good. Very good. Now, when you look at your own lifting career, obviously longevity played a huge role of focus on. I can't get snapped
Yeah,
up like you said. I'm trying not to
yeah,
be dumb with these lifts, trying not to be stupid and just jerk it around. You went into the gym with minimal
yeah,
ego. You're trying to learn from people that were
yeah.
more experienced. How has that changed in recent years? Like I guess I'm Gen Z, right? I'm born '98, so uh, among people in my generation, how much do you think those things have changed, ego and so forth?
um, well, I'll tell you, the when someone showed me how to squat, it was you squat to the floor. There was no,
Cool.
you don't go below parallel, you stay above parallel, or vice versa. It was you take this weight, you put it on your back, and you get to the point where you can squat to the floor and squat back up again. That was a squat,
That was a
right?
squat.
There was none of this. You tilt this way, you tilt that way, don't go this far. There was
Yeah,
none of
yeah.
that.
Vertical shin and wide stance
No,
and
there was none of that. I mean, no one talked about that stuff back then. It was just put that bar on your back, put some weight on it, learn how to squat to the floor, and back up again. That was it.
amazing.
And the same thing with the bench and the deadlift, right? It was like, put some weight on the bar for a deadlift, learn to pull up and back instead
Yeah,
of straight up. You want to use the big muscles in your ass to
yeah,
help
yeah,
move the weight, right?
yeah, yeah.
So, and I think that's where things have changed big time. And I mentioned this on Instagram too, around January, that the squat is no longer the squat. And that's why I say that I think powerlifting, for all of the good it's done, and I mean, I
Definitely.
incorporated West Side into my Highland Games training and all that stuff. But in
Cool.
traditional bodybuilding, powerlifting really screwed things up because
Mm,
when I learned how to bench press, there was no leg drive in bench press. The bench press was to build your chest. So now what's happened is you have all these guys who have just learned how to move weight by
yeah,
using their lower body. And
yeah.
now and now what's happened is you have to use the Larson press to build your chest because no one has a bench press anymore. Because it's like, oh well, no, you have to use your legs. No, you don't. You use your chest. That's what it's for,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Even then, would you even have like consciously tried to, let's say you paused it, you got down to your chest. Would you think about even like squeezing with your glutes on the way up, or were you just trying to make it as dedicated to the upper body as possible, or did that not even go through your head, the glutes?
That stuff never entered my brain ever. It still doesn't.
you know?
Even now when I bench press, I don't think about, man, I got to fire my glutes to get this off my chest. No,
Right.
it's I got to bring it down and press it off my chest.
Yeah.
And we didn't do any pause benching back then. It was all touch and go.
Touch and
It was
go.
all touch and go benching. And of course, we didn't, slam the bar on our chest.
Yeah. It wasn't bouncy
Bounce
necessarily.
behind it.
Yeah.
There was no
Yeah.
bouncing, but there
No
was
bounce.
a definite touch and go.
Right.
And we tried to move the bench as fast as we could.
Yeah, it's funny
So
because I hear a term like, and maybe you've heard this term too, t-shirt touch, like t-shirt touch and go. But I'm sure
yeah,
back then you guys just called it bench press. You didn't really have a term for it. That's just
it was
how
just
you
bench
bench.
press. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just touch and go bench. That's all we did. But yeah, I mean, I've heard that now, and it's
Yeah.
and that's certainly my bench. My bench has not changed in 35 years. Not one bit. I bench the exact same way I did when I was 16, 17 years old, and I think that's why I'm still benching.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right.
Clearly the rep quality got you through it, right? So yeah.
Right.
Rep quality. A lot of my
Yeah,
guests on the show and good friends that, people I respect who are more experienced than me, stronger than me, will say the same thing. Like rep quality is just like on the handful of things that matter most. Rep quality is easily on that list, and then even in like the top 3, right? So yeah.
absolutely. And for us, it was always form over weight at the beginning, right? You learn how to do the movement properly, and then you progressed. You didn't throw a bunch of weight on there and just and hurt
Make
yourself.
it move.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very interesting view into training history. And, it's funny. I feel like in my own experience, Adam, I've had to unpack some of this stuff with like whether it's powerlifting or different trends where, and maybe not those exact trends that you mentioned, but it's like people have gone so deep into getting the most out of the numbers where, in the last year, I've changed my focus to I can only do a squat if it's like this in the sense of, like you said, deep, quad dominant, like not just trying to move weight. Like it's got to be good quality, back straight, all the common sense stuff. Same thing with my deadlift, same thing with my bench. It's almost like a back to basics where, I'm going to bench, squat, deadlift like a bodybuilder because I care about my body. I don't want to get hurt, and I also don't care that much. I mean, I do care about the numbers, but I'm not
Yeah.
competing, and I'm not interested in competing with guys that are doing all this other stuff. Maybe one day I'll
No.
do my own competition, but I'm not in a hurry to do that stuff. So
Yeah, for sure. And the same thing is, and the same thing with my squat. My squat stance has not changed in 35 years. I still squat the exact same way I did back then.
Yeah.
And I listened to the guy who told me, no, you squat this way. And that's the thing is that, when I'm in the gym today and I see all of the younger guys in there, all the teenagers,
Yeah.
there's definitely a different mentality. When I was a teenager and someone walked up to me and said, hey man, do you mind if I just give you a small piece of advice, just a tiny little thing that might change this movement for you, hugely? And I said, yeah, sure, right? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to learn.
Yeah.
But now I don't approach anybody because the few times that I have, they look at me like I have 10 heads. It's like, who the hell are you? I'm doing this the right way. And I'm thinking, no, you're not. And I'll see you in 5 years' time, and you look the exact same way you do as I see you today.
Yeah.
But you go ahead and do what you're doing, and I'll see you in 5 years.
And that's being gracious, saying I'll see you in 5 years if they haven't gotten snapped up and given up on
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, and I think that's a big thing is that the gym culture, the social media gym culture has made everybody into an expert.
Right.
And really you're an expert of golf. You put it nicely. Like, I mean, think of me as the Sergeant Hartman.
I'm too heavy, sir. Because you are a disgusting fat body, Private Pile.
When I see a lot of teenage guys in the gym these days, and they're full, they're all full of attitude, wearing their pump covers, and I'm sorry, it's a hoodie, okay? It's a hoodie. It's not a pump cover. It's a hoodie. I see these guys, and to me, I'm thinking, you guys are pukes, right? You've been here for 2 years, You're the lowest form of life is what you are. So you got to learn the right way or whatever. So yeah, and maybe that's because I'm, I'm older now that I feel that way. But certainly, I was one of those pukes as a teenager. The difference is that I chose to learn, and
you accepted the fact that you didn't know a lot and that you needed to learn. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, if I saw some guy pulling 400 pounds in a deadlift, I didn't walk up and say, "Hey, man, you're not doing that properly." when I was like 17 years old, I didn't say a word to that guy. I was like, "Wow, that's
good." Yeah.
I want to be that guy, But everybody's an expert nowadays, and it's
a sense of entitlement is a terrible thing, isn't it? Right, where maybe someone's quick to form critique like that, that example, but also the same thing, like you said, you genuinely have so much experience and information to share that if you're being polite and you're just saying, hey, by the way, here's a good tip that could make a big difference, people are like, I don't need your advice, pal. Like it's,
exactly.
you can't be too much of a jerk being like, hey, that's wrong, do this, like, but you can't also pretend that someone couldn't correct you, because we all have little things along the way we're going to pick up on, and oh, that really clicked once I started doing this, so might as well.
Yeah.
And even if you don't use it, might as well just be polite, in my opinion, right? Someone wants to come up and say something to me, I'm going to be so polite to that person, because chances are they're not trying to be a jerk, most people.
100%, and I'm the same way, and I'll certainly help anybody that comes up to me, but I rarely go out of my way to help someone now, because they just
it's different.
Yeah, they just get their back up and they get all pissy, and I just have no time for that.
So you got this excellent base of bodybuilding, and you carried that with you into the Highland Games. Now, for people who don't know, could you just tell them a little bit about maybe the history of the Highland Games, what the events are, and what type of strength really comes in handy for those movements?
Just sure. So the Highland Games, we like to say, is the original extreme sport. So it is it's the epitome of explosive athletics, because you're basically talking about a decathlon style event, but everything is super heavy, right? So the Highland Games that you see now is a Victorian creation. The original Highland Games, which were stone lifting, stone throwing, caber toss, that kind of stuff, that goes back 1,000 years.
Wow.
Right? And these were all tests of manhood. So they all have their bases in your manhood tests. But the games, as you see now, the hammer throwing, the weight throwing, those are Victorian events. But so it goes back a very long time, and traditionally, as I said, there were some stones, but a lot of it was running, jumping, that kind of stuff, races, tug of war, all that. So, and those all still exist in the Highland Games today. But the athletics side of things is very demanding. Everything is very heavy. There's 8 traditional events. So we have 2 stone events. You have 1 heavy stone, which is usually can be anywhere from 22 to 25 pounds, and you putt that. Sort of like one-handed, like in Braveheart when Hamish putted the big stone. Well, now we do it with you do it with just one hand. You have a shot put style stone, which is 16, 17 pounds. You have 2 weights, 56 pounds and 28. So those are cannonball shaped lead weights with a chain on a handle, and you throw those discus style. And a little fun story about the shot put is that the Olympic shot put, as it is today, owns its creation to the Scots. So the Scots were the ones that invented shot putting stones, and it just progressed into shots that you see today, right? Then we have 2 hammers. We have the caber toss and the weight over the bar, and all of these, their history is not in warfare. People like to romanticize, and it's all warfare based.
Right.
Well, can you imagine flipping a caber against the castle wall and someone who's 350 pounds climbing up the caber. No, right? They all have their origins in agriculture, farming, logging. Most of them were probably just drunken dares, right?
That makes sense.
That's how it all began. Really, is mostly just drunken dares. But yeah, it's very demanding, very very heavy stuff. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, would you say there's any few exercises that you think have translated the best over to the Highland Games performance that you think are just like these are the essentials to train?
Absolutely. And I think that's where I'm sort of in a unique position on this podcast is that, as I said, for 15 years, I was strictly bodybuilding. I was slow, controlled, time under tension, right? Getting the biggest contraction, chasing the pump, all that stuff. I mean, I was living pumping iron. I mean, I've seen that movie, that documentary, probably 1,000 times, right?
Amazing.
So we grew up idolizing that documentary and those guys. So bodybuilding. When I got into the Highland Games in 2005, my first training year for that was 2004. I had to completely rethink everything that I thought I knew about training. Nothing could be slow and controlled anymore. Everything had to be explosive. Everything had to be fast. Because in order to throw things far, you have to generate enough force to throw things a long distance. You're not going to do that doing slow, controlled bicep curls.
For sure. Right?
So the Olympic lifts and all their variations are key if you're learning to be fast, explosive, strong, powerful, athletic.
That's great.
And I had no background whatsoever in the Olympic lifts. None whatsoever.
It was like starting fresh.
I started fresh. I was completely green. Looking back now, I wish I would have started when I was a teenager. Man, if I could go back tomorrow and do it all over again, I would start Olympic lifting right from the start. It's amazing. Now, I'm not talking about the CrossFit style Olympic lifting. I mean, between you and I and I guess the interweb, I hate CrossFit.
CrossFit style, anything applied to a movement is usually a recipe for, I hate to say suboptimal, but subpar results, let's say.
The only thing great about CrossFit is that it opened up the mainstream population to Olympic lifting, which I think is great.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah.
Yeah, which is good. But so I had to learn from scratch. So I bought DVDs. There's no coaches here, so I bought a couple of DVDs on how to Olympic lift. I jumped on YouTube. At that time, YouTube was just starting. I mean, it was pretty much the freaking day that it started. And I tried to find people online to watch and sort of, copy or emulate them. And I did the best I could, but I had to change how I trained in order to become a Highland Games thrower. So the Olympic lifts were huge. Of course, pulls, any kind of pulls, deadlifts, trap bars, jump shrugs, all that stuff. I incorporated all that. And if you go into my YouTube channel, there's a big section of my YouTube from like 15 years ago when I first started filming stuff. And all that content is there. All the things that I started doing. But I think having that bodybuilding base, the strong lower body, the strong back, the good shoulders from doing behind the neck presses, all of that really gave me the base I needed to not, hurt myself.
You didn't dislocate your shoulder or tear your rotator cuff from all those presses?
No. No. So I find it very strange when I see people say, the Olympic lifts are not great for building muscle. I mean, it makes no sense to me. Have you seen an Olympic lifter's back?
They're jacked.
Have you seen their traps? Have you seen their shoulders? Have you seen their legs? They're constantly pulling stuff off the floor. They're constantly squatting. They're constantly shrugging. I put on a ton of size. over the years training for the Highland Games. A ton of size, and I attribute that to a lot of these explosive movements. So
it just doesn't make sense too, the logic. It's like, in order to do all that work, that explosive movement, the repetitions, the sessions, the weight, it has to be done by something. It's your muscles. So, working the muscle, sure, it's a very different time under tension, but the tension's also higher. So it's like,
right.
I think people just don't understand that work has to be produced by something, and it's your muscles, right?
Absolutely. And it's also going to teach you endurance. It's going to teach you applied force. It's going to teach you, how to be efficient in your lifting, all that stuff.
Definitely.
So, and even when I hear someone say, the Olympic lifts are not great carryovers to powerlifting, I think, what? You're learning how to pull things off the floor quickly.
Yep.
Where's everybody's sticking point? It's either at their shin or their knee. So, I mean, that stuff helped my deadlift a lot.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and what you say makes sense too. You had to get more explosive in your training. You see this too, where some people have these mistaken ideas. Maybe this would be something a bad personal trainer would program for somewhere. It's like a weighted punch to get better at boxing, but you're training at such a different speed and intensity that it doesn't translate. It doesn't work that way. You're training slow, you'll be slow. So for you had to train fast to be fast, right? Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Bill Kazmaier, always said that if you lift slow, you will always be slow. And that's, that stuck with me when I started doing the Highland Games. And certainly just all the overhead pressing. I mean, just all the push pressing, all of the jerks, all the squats. I mean, everything. I mean, I didn't really know what strength building was until I started doing the Highland Games. And I was a pretty strong guy, even as a bodybuilder. I mean, I focused on strength, but a lot of the times it was higher rep movements, like sets of 10 and that kind of stuff. And you're not going to get strong doing sets of 10. You got to do triples, doubles, heavy singles, that kind of stuff. That's when you really start to learn how to build strength. And the accompanied size, because let's face it, if you're strong, you're big. They just kind of go hand in hand, right? So
totally. Yeah. I've talked about this so many videos and even on these podcasts too, right? Contractile tissue, you control the variables. You take all these people in the same weight class for bench or squat. What's going to be the determining factor, right? Guy with bigger legs squats more. Guy with the bigger chest bench more, and triceps, right? Nothing else would really make sense at the end of the day. And actually, there's a young guy. Have you heard of Benjamin McIntyre?
I'm not sure.
I mentioned him briefly on the last episode with Aiden, but he's a young powerlifter. I think he's only about 18 years old, maybe even 17. And he said that in one of his videos. What powerlifting really is about at the end of the day is getting really jacked on the muscles that are relevant to the lifts. Technique can only carry you so far. Yeah,
for sure, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now for the Olympic lifts specifically, let's say someone isn't doing a sport like Highland Games where the explosiveness is, critical. Even just those variations, those components like, let's say training the front squat or I've seen you do your clock off style press or a snatch grip deadlift. Do you think these, as a form of movement variety, do you think those would lend some benefits to people who are already training squat, bench, and deadlift, or just in general?
Sure. Yeah, do all the lifts. I always say do everything. Do all the squats. Do all the pulls. Do all the pressing variations. They're all going to be beneficial. I mean, it really irritates me when somebody says, "Don't do this lift. Do this lift instead." And I'm thinking, no, do all the lifts. Do everything. It's just going to make you a better athlete. And the more tools that you have in your toolbox to draw from, the better off you're going to be. So why wouldn't you? I mean, everybody loves to consume knowledge, right? Get into this whole science-based. It's all about consuming knowledge. We got to consume as much as we possibly can, but nobody knows how to apply that knowledge. But then there's someone comes and says to me, "Yeah, but your experience means jack shit. Well,
No, it doesn't. No, it certainly doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't tell someone that's got 35 years living experience that means nothing. So
Even when I talk to guys who are, my generation, right, mid-20s, who are incredibly strong, well-developed physiques, they haven't been training for decades like you have, but they've come to really appreciate that experience side. And I hear so many things. Even I've heard Jeffrey Verdi Schofield talk about this in his videos too, where it's like, yeah, this generation we start off just bombarded with information, right? And you go through this process where you rely on science less and less. And Jeffrey used to put science-based in his profile, but he doesn't anymore. And it's not to say that, he got dumber, right? It's like, hitting himself in the head with a dumbbell. Now he doesn't need science. It's like you pick up experience, you start to learn how to apply things. Like, say, application and theory, it's not always the same thing. You can say you know how to do all these lifts, but, let that be the test in the gym when you actually get under the bar. If you really think you know what you're doing with biomechanics, right? Like some 19-year-old who has never squatted 3 plates in their life is going to give a lecture on biomechanics. Yeah.
well, this is the thing, and I think in case of where Jeff is concerned, he's just maturing as a lifter.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's you see people in reels saying, you've matured in lifting when you no longer bench press. That's not maturity. Maturity is when is when you see the benefit in all lifts, right?
Yeah.
There's no bad lift. And I'm not talking about squatting in a Bosu ball. I'm talking about the legitimate lifts. And that's where you get into the whole optimal versus suboptimal and old school and new school and all that stuff. So that's just showing that he's maturing, which is what you want to see.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Right?
And I see a lot of good things with Jeff. He trains so many different movements. The guy's work ethic is clearly impeccable. He's got such developed, muscles. It's not just, he's not torso dominant like a guy obsessed with powerlifting or any of this stuff. He's working everything. And so to see someone flourish and learn from that, it's going to hopefully keep him lifting for years. And I want the same thing. I want to stay injury free. Do I want to get strong? Yeah. Do I want to get big? Yeah. But if I delay the next half inch on my biceps and it saves my tendon, or the next 25 pounds on my squat gets pushed back several months because I can do it more reasonably, more efficiently, if that saves my lower back, that's always worth it to me. What's the hurry, right? So
yeah,
you're still lifting, right? 50 plus. You got any lifting tips for guys in their 40s, 50s, or what do you think? Is that a scam when people talk like that? Here's how you lift in your 40s,
No, well, excuse me, that's a whole other topic. I mean, people that, and I mean, there are channels on YouTube that cater to the over 40 person, and I mean, they're disgusting. I mean, no one over 40 should lift heavy. You should you should be lifting cans of soup, right? Light.
Yeah.
All
forget about a good back squat or anything, just heavy in general. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but no, I think, I think Jeff is sort of one of those cases where, heaven forbid you say stuff like, well, that worked for him, because you can't say that, right? Guys like Menno Henselman.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can't say, well, it worked for me, bro, right? No, I mean, Jeff's training style works great for Jeff. Now, I think he trains 6-7 days a week. I could never do that. I mean, not even when I was in my 20s or 30s or 40s. I mean, all of my biggest lifts were in my mid to late 30s to early 40s. That's when I hit, sort of my ridiculous strength phase. But even then, I couldn't train 6 days a week. I trained 3, maybe 4 days a week. Right now, I train 3 Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I just started working in sort of some active recovery days. Because recovery is important. I mean, there's training hard, but there's also training smart too. And the smart training comes in when you get older. If you want to keep doing it, then you've got to be smart about things, right? You can't. I mean, I've been telling my kids, their entire lives. Life is tough. It's even tougher when you're stupid. So don't do stupid stuff, right? Be smart about things, and you listen to your body and you do what your body can handle, and that's really the end of the story right there. I mean, but yeah, no, Jeff's really come along in the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to, no matter injuries are not uncommon. I think you're an example of someone who's pretty much completely injury free. But even in Jeff's case, I'm not going to hold it against the guy that he's had some injuries. He's clearly learning from his mistakes. He's trying to adapt the movements, not push himself so hard. He's done some things like he did. I don't remember if you saw this one. It was a max deadlift every day for a month. Terrible idea. He paid for it. He knows he paid for it. He's probably never going to do anything like that again. Did it make for good social media content? But it probably wasn't. Yeah, but it probably wasn't worth it, right? So it's things like that in hindsight, you're always going to think, why'd I do that? Why'd I do that? Why'd I do that? Why'd I do that? Because
frequency and volume are huge, and some guys can handle a lot of volume, some guys can't, and you have to adjust the volume, or else you will get injured. And yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. I don't like to say I'm lucky because
right.
I mean,
it was intentional, right? You tried.
Sure. I mean, I always worked out hard. There was lots of times when I was younger where I puked at the gym on leg days, right? Because I said, we were living the Pumping Iron documentary. You hear also say, I threw up many times. I passed out many times. So that was our mentality back then. It's like, yeah, shit, I'm going to squat until I puke. I mean, I don't do that now, but I did back then. But at the same time, they were always full range movements, and that's right. I think the key to longevity is hitting those end ranges, and maintaining those end ranges. So yeah, I mean, to say I've been lucky, yeah, I mean, it's like you say, it was all on purpose, so that I was still lifting for my whole life. Now, have I been completely injury free? I mean, that's another thing too. I mean, there's are you hurt or are you injured?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this you say it in sports all the time. So I've had rotator cuff issues off and on over the years. I don't now. Because for the last several years, I've really focused on band warm-ups for rotator cuffs, and just maintaining full range movements. But yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I've had sore elbows. I've had sore shoulders. I've had sore knees, but never to the point where I would say that I was injured.
Yeah.
Now, I only had one injury that I would call an injury, and that was in 2019. And if you go back into my YouTube, the video is there of the injury. I was doing a 402 front squat. I got the first rep perfectly. The second rep, I went down into the full depth, and I felt this, like somebody kicked me in the side of the leg. There was no bruising. There was no tearing. I didn't require surgery. I jumped on the rehab right away because the thing is that it happened 2 months before I was going to France to compete in Highland Games.
Oh no!
So anyway, but yeah, that was the one and only time that I would say I was ever injured, and it was just one of those fluke things. It was one of those things that you don't. It was a weight that was in my wheelhouse. It wasn't something that I was not used to.
Yeah.
So whatever thing the universe that day just said that this is the way it's going to be, right? I don't know if it was dehydrated, I was tired, I was what, there was that, but just one of those fluke things. Yeah.
So do you think it was like a quad thing, like that outer quad?
Oh yeah. And I've got a pretty good little slice in there in the side of my quad, and it's sad too because it sort of happened just before things kind of went sideways with COVID and gyms were getting locked down.
True.
So I didn't really get a chance to really move the heavy weights that I needed to
rehab, right?
To rehab, right? So
yeah,
I've been playing catch up ever since with that. But anyway,
I mean it took a long time before you had an injury like that, right? And even now you're still lifting pretty big weights. So
yeah.
That's good. Wonderful.
But again, it was by design, man. I mean, it's, I've tried not to be a dumbass. Right.
I'm trying to learn from that. Right. I see that. Yeah. You focus on quality so much. Now,
Yeah.
speaking of front squats and barbells and all these things, one of the things we had thought about as a topic was just kind of old school lifts, as like a category, things that
Yeah.
no one would have thought, hey, this is trash, and I'm going to make a video on why you shouldn't do this one. Would you like to prepare a defense for the old school lifts that have been called suboptimal and dangerous and whatnot?
Yeah, man, this whole optimal suboptimal thing is just it's just so tiring. I mean, the only time any lift is suboptimal is when you're not doing it properly. That's it.
Amen to
Right?
that.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
any lift, if you execute it properly, the way it's meant to be executed, is
Yeah.
always optimal. Always.
Yeah.
So all these old tried and true exercises that we did, that I've done all my life, like the behind the neck press, right? Even like behind the neck, like lat pull downs.
Yeah, pull down. Yeah.
Right, like all this stuff. And I mean, I'm kind of drawing a blank now, but I mean, you could probably list off 10 old school exercises. Yeah.
Barbell curls and upright rows.
Oh man, yeah, great. I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, if you don't execute it properly, then you're going to get hurt. And I think that's what happens. And because social media, right? Chris Hitchens, I don't know if you follow Chris Hitchens or not, or know of Chris Hitchens. Always great thing is that he said that social media gives people of low intelligence too loud of a voice. Right? And that's what we're seeing. So I think we're just seeing the people who are not doing the lifts properly are getting injured, and then they're saying, don't do this exercise because you're going to get hurt. And it's like, no, you got hurt because you're an idiot. Yeah, you didn't do it properly.
I think it's disingenuous too, like, and just dishonest overall for them to not reflect on their own journey and see the flaws and point that out and be willing to admit that. Instead be like, no, the lift was the bad thing. I think there's a big part of that camp of people that they just won't admit that they messed up. Like you mentioned the bench press guy. He says in the reel, when you stop doing bench press, it's because you know what you're doing, you're experienced now. If someone says that, my first thought is it's a sign of immaturity, if anything, because they quit.
Exactly.
They quit. They wouldn't learn how to do it right, so they quit.
Exactly. And that's why when I see things online, people say the bench press is not optimal for hypertrophy. You cannot build a big chest by doing the barbell bench press. That's all we've done. That's all I've done. But the thing is, as I said before, the bench press was always a chest exercise. So
always
sure, if you're going to throw in if you're going to throw in leg drive, then yeah, I mean, you're not using the full weight of your upper body.
Right.
You're using your lower body, right?
Right.
So
yeah. No, for sure. And actually, it's funny. One of the V-Shred clips I got back when I made that Arnold Schwarzenegger video, that meme, was V-Shred saying, here's why bench press will not make your chest any bigger. Like, that's like almost verbatim what he said. Oh boy, what a horrible way to phrase it. Not, it'll make you less big than this other thing that's like super obvious. It won't make you any bigger at all.
Right. No, and I've always argued that the barbell bench press is, is far superior to even dumbbells. And I've done dumbbells. I mean, I haven't done much dumbbell work in the last 15 or so years. It's all been barbell work. But I've seen more injuries from guys doing dumbbells than barbells. Now, I'm not talking about the Scott Mendelsons that were benching 800 pounds and Luther Peck. I'm talking about, your average gym goer, like the gym bros, right, that are only doing, half range movements with 100-pound dumbbells. And then what happens is, boop, this happened. They smack themselves in the face. I've seen it all the time. But the great thing about barbells is you can move more weight and it's balanced, right?
Yeah.
you're not fighting one arm with the other.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree. I think overall the dumbbell bench it shouldn't be the main thing you do for your chest, right? The heaviest thing. And you see that too, where people talk about, this one's kind of a pet peeve almost for me now. They say dumbbell bench gives you more range of motion, which might be true, might not, right? So that barbell hit you, or that dumbbell hit you in the face because it's not a skinny little bar that you can easily manipulate.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, if you want to add more range of motion to your bench press, then do incline bench press, but
Right.
do the incline bench press properly.
Yeah.
Get it right
Yeah.
down into your freaking throat, which
Yeah.
is what we were always told, which is what I still do, instead of coming out here. Right,
Yeah.
start playing with these angles. Oh, it's got to be 30 degrees, and you only come down this far. No, man. I mean, get it back into your throat. I mean, that's the full range.
Fantastic. So no exercises to demonize today. Only bad trends and bad ideas.
Yeah. No, there are no bad exercises, just bad lifters.
Interesting. Now, I think that's a good segue, Adam, into our next topic. So, speaking of executing lifts the wrong way and thus being the true understanding, not okay, the lift's wrong, it's you and how you do it. There's this crowd of people that we've been talking about, this trend of, oh, you don't have proof that this type of thing is dangerous, right? Whether it's cat back deadlifts, super heavy Jefferson curl zerchers, maxing out on gigantic lifts just to show off, and chains everywhere and wobbling around on skateboards. What do you think of that movement that says, show me the evidence it's dangerous and then I'll stop doing what I'm doing? What do you think of that crowd?
Well, I mean, as we're seeing right now, that crowd is slowly getting injured.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's only, and we've said this together many times, chatting back and forth, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Right? And you never know what's going to happen, but it always happens. And someone says, well, you look at guys like Atlas, and well, it's not going to happen to me because I built up that range of motion, and the body's adaptive, and it will adapt, and your spine is not rigid; it's meant to bend and move. Yeah, I mean, sure, your spine's meant to bend and move. I mean, fuck, I did yoga. I did yoga for years, right? But I didn't do yoga with pulling 600 pounds at the same time. Right? Yep. So that's the thing. I mean, under these heavy loads, it's only a matter of time. And the same thing as my, as I said it in my front squat, it might just take that one fluky time.
Yep.
Right. And luckily, I mean, mine's musculature, so it was easily healed. The thing about these back injuries, knee injuries, that kind of stuff, they're all cumulative, right? They get worse and worse. They never properly heal. You always re-injure yourself. So it's only a matter of time, because, I mean, I've seen it 100 times. And people might say, yeah, but that's still not proof.
Yeah, well, Menno Henselmans are saying, well, these are anecdotes, so we need more data to be conclusive.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's, I mean, form breakdown to a degree happens when you start lifting heavy weights.
Yeah.
And as somebody might say, yeah, but you weren't lifting the weights that these guys are lifting, so you can't really give an opinion. No, I don't do zercher squats because I think they're stupid, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I don't see a big benefit over a front squat personally.
Right, but I've had a 500 front squat.
Yeah.
I have had a 400-pound behind the neck jerk.
That's ridiculous to me. That's insane.
Right? So
That's
I've
insane.
had a 605 back squat, ass to grass back squat. And I've had in my max bench, my PR bench is 410, and that's with no leg drive, right? Because we didn't use leg drive, so it's not. So I have had some pretty big lifts in my life. But there are just certain things that I would just never do, and it's like I said this morning on Instagram, is it only takes a matter of time, and it's called the small of your back for a reason, right? It's the small part of your back. you want to round your upper back, fine. I do it all the time to stiff leg deadlifts. It allows me to get more hamstring out of it. But I've never in my life rounded my lower back.
Intentionally.
Intentionally, and I have never been injured, never in my lower back. And I'm not going to knock on wood because I don't have to worry about that because it's not something that I'm going to start doing now.
Nope.
I learned to deadlift properly, and I was never a huge deadlifter. I'm not really built for deadlifts. I mean, look at the length of my arm, right? Like, when I'm standing with my hands in my pockets, my whole hand does not go in my pocket. Right, but I still pull 585. So
that's good. 6 plates is awesome.
Yeah. So to me, it's just a matter of time, and you can.
And it's easy to not see that when you're like young and hot-headed, right?
Yeah, sure. It's like, who's this boomer telling me that I can't?
Goodness. Yeah, and part of that too, we were just speaking just before we started our recording today, as we were chatting. I mentioned that the deadliest lift guy, who's very strong, very impressive. I mean, this is a guy who can pull like 900 pounds on like a conventional deadlift. So very strong young man. And he seems to have a good bit of training knowledge, but he has an attitude towards lifting that I think is, it's just like, it's like you say, you get away with it in the short term, but it's a matter of time. And he just had a catastrophic injury doing a Hadfield squat, which is basically a box squat with your arms on the rack, and he used an SSB. So you can think about that position with 900 plus pounds. Very impressive that he grinded through it, but he mentioned he felt the pain in the moment and just forced himself to finish the rep, dislocated his shoulder, pretty severe injury if you look at the x-ray he shared on social media. And it's like, how many times are you going to do that in your lifetime? Or are you going to do it like twice to both shoulders and then modify what you're doing? Or are you going to take that as information of, I need to change what I'm doing? And don't get me wrong, he's way stronger, way bigger than I am, and possibly way bigger and stronger than I'll ever be. But nonetheless, he says things like risk versus reward is like a cope for weak people. Meanwhile, Tom Platz is very big on saying, you shouldn't let that risk exceed the reward. You should be chasing them, in a way where you're not scared, but you need to consider it, right? So what do you think about risk to reward? Does it just go without saying?
No, I mean, I certainly feel the same way as Tom Platz does, and probably you do. I mean, there's an element of common sense that has to come in your training, right? You have to be able to predict your own future, and you keep saying, if I keep doing this when I'm doing it now, in 10 years' time, I am not going to be doing the same movement or anything else. So all these guys on social media that I see that are doing all these super impressive, what they call old school strongman lifts.
Sure.
I mean, they're getting you views and followers, but what's going to happen? You're going to enjoy all your money in a freaking wheelchair, right? I mean, how is that any quality of life?
Yeah. So much for the adaptations.
Right? Yeah. I mean, the body is only going to adapt so much, and when you're using those small windows of movement, right? Like your lower back, your elbow, your your shoulder girdle. Those are all small areas, right? So the window is very small.
Yep. Yep. And that joint complex, right? That ball and socket meeting the shoulder blade, that's a little more delicate than your hip, which is also a ball and socket. So to have that type of, I don't know, I can't say I envy him.
No, and as I said, those are all recurring injuries. So from now on, he's always going to have
he's predisposed,
a potential relapse of that dislocated shoulder, right? It's just so, it's like I know you're a big movie guy, especially spaghetti westerns. Sergio Leone, Man with No Name. I love all those movies. Anything Clint Eastwood, anything spaghetti western. But one rule that I live by, and I've lived by my whole adult life, is based on Magnum Force, one of the greatest Dirty Harry movies of all time. And one quote in that movie has stuck with me my whole life is when Dirty Harry says, "A man's got to know his limitations." Right? And if you don't do that, I mean, you're just going to set yourself up for
Yeah,
huge injury.
100%. 100%. Yeah, and as much as the younger generations, I should say plural, right, that are big on YouTube fitness now, there's I think it's probably a net positive trend. This isn't the same as maxing out all the weights and doing crazy things and rounded back this and 5 pieces of equipment combined, but the whole natty limit thing, right? This trend now is to say no natty limits, just push yourselves. I like the essence of that movement because it's saying screw someone saying this is when your bench progress will stop. This is how big your arms can be. It's just silly to put arbitrary limit. We don't know what our genetic difference is. You have to find out by putting in the work and quality sleep, nutrition. But at the same time, what you just said is inescapable. I couldn't imagine how much worse my training would be if I thought that I just like didn't have limits. That I could just add an infinite amount of weight. I'll go from a 400-pound to a 600-pound deadlift this year. At what cost to try and get there, right? Like it'd just be ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah. And I agree with everything you said. And I know that we were kind of talking yesterday a little bit about the time under tension, right? Being
right.
a bodybuilding meme. But with anything, you get out of it what you put into it. So I like to think that there is no natural limit.
Yeah.
Right. But there is a human limit. There is a limit that your body will be able to withstand. Yeah. Right. So there might not be any natty limit as far as muscle building goes. I mean, you get you get out of it what you put into it, but there's a human limit. There's only so much that the body can handle.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just going to break down. So
just like when you get a product, right, and it says maximum pressure rating, every time you go over that gauge, right, or something. Yeah. Like that, these things come from the factory. We're not exactly sure what the upper limits are, but we know what would be way too extreme. 1,000-pound bench, probably not going to happen, right? You have to go to the extremes where it becomes obvious, but I'll never tell my audience down to a pound or down to an inch what their limits are. But yeah,
exactly. So just getting back to all the guys like Deadliest Lift and Atlas and all these guys that are pushing these ranges of motion, saying that the body is adaptive. There is a limit to how far it will adapt.
Yep.
And it's going to break.
Yep. Something's going to snap.
Right. Yeah. Geez. So.
Oh goodness. So that's kind of going into that whole the idea of evidence, right? And these evidence-based guys. So their biggest defense is, show me proof that what I'm doing is dangerous, aside from them getting injured. Now, how do you find that mindset carries on to things like science-based training, where, this is proven by studies and this science-based video? What do you think of this science-based training trend overall?
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, that's so great. And I'm a biologist in my day job, right? So I'm a microbiologist. I deal with diseases of fish, bacteria, and viruses. So I read journal articles all the time, right? I know hundreds of PhDs, and I think science should be left out of lifting completely. Right? There's experience. I think experience, and I, again, getting back to my Instagram, I put a post out back in January, sort of my 2022 breakdown, right? And I said that science has ruined bodybuilding, right? The science-based crowd, and it's 100% true. And what you don't realize is that bodybuilding is really an artful science. It's more art than science. It's more subjective than objective. It's all based on the individual, and it's all based on your trial and error, your own experimentation. So at the basis of weightlifting, it's already science. The science is already there. It's all just your own personal experimentation, using what works, tossing what doesn't work. So to say that, oh, well, I have proof that behind that press is dangerous because this was said by this person in this study. And it's like, well, I've been doing it for 35 years, and experience always trumps science.
Yep.
Even in my job, like I said, I know hundreds of PhDs, and half of them are complete idiots. like you can't carry on a normal conversation with them, and they're always, it's like, qualifications and experience. Man, that's where the money is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
It's like I said, consuming knowledge versus applying knowledge. So bodybuilding to me will always be more art than science. Leave the science out of it, and learn by watching the guys that are doing it into their 50s. Watch like I did. I watched the older guys when I was starting out, and now I'm one of the older guys. And the fact that I'm still squatting ass to grass to the floor, despite for years, ass to grass squatting was bad for your knees, that should tell you right there that it's not bad for your knees. That I'm 51 and I'm still squatting to the floor. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I got to say, of all the things, like I've done a lot of heavy quad work in my lifetime too, whether it was leg press or more recently back squats, or have you seen most recent months front squats, never really had any issues. Of all the things that I've ever felt sore, maybe the elbows a bit from bench pressing, the tendons. I had a bad program that I think I gave myself tendonitis. I just grinded through it too hard. But other than that, of all the joints I've had, little issues here and there or injuries, my knees have never been a problem, and I've done plenty of heavy and plenty of deep, right? So yeah.
I'll tell you sort of how I explain squats, because I don't like to get too sciencey when someone asks me about squats, and I always say treat squats like the brakes on your car. Okay, they're like, oh, what do you mean by that? If you drive to a stop sign, going 60, and slam on your brakes just before the stop sign, it won't take very long before your brakes have to be replaced.
Yep.
But if you come to a slow rolling stop, right, that's part of the squat. And the second thing is that treat it like a manual transmission. So, right, so when just before your car stalls, there's that little point where it lurches forward, right, before it stalls. So that I explain that as the stretch reflex. So slow descent, past parallel, right? Get that little stretch reflex, and then back up again. And they're like, geez, yeah, that makes total sense. So, but so that's why I don't like. Certainly athletic wise, there is a time to squat above parallel, like with box squats.
Sure.
Great for athletes. But if you're coming down in a parallel squat and you're slamming on the brakes at 90 degrees, there's going to be a point where your knees are just not going to work anymore for squats. And that's why a lot of people my age don't squat anymore, because they never went past 90, right? They slammed on the brakes and that was it. Instead of coming to a slow rolling stop at the bottom, right? Popping the clutch and you're back up again. So
that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to explain it. I especially like that brake analogy. You have to use that now. That's good.
Yeah. Don't come slamming to the stop sign, right? Slow rolling stop, man. Slow rolling stop.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So for the science topic, do you think part of the limits of science, without us being too nerdy here, do you think part of the problem with these study designs is, I'll say two things, right? Number one, the lack of experience of the people conducting the science, and then number two, just an inherent limitation of how do you control all these variables, right? There's so many things that you can account for. what do you think? Do you think those are two big limits to the science of training?
Uh, yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't think. I mean, I can tell you right now that I have not read one exercise science article in my entire life. I haven't
Right
read
on.
any of them. Um, I have listened to guys on their YouTube talk about meta studies.
Yeah.
Well, this meta study says this, right? And I've gone into their link to access the study, and you find out that there are huge flaws in all of those studies, right? Well,
Yeah.
they're based something on. Well, we took these five individuals, and and now we're making a huge blanket statement based on five people. So, yeah, yeah, the limitations for me have always been there. Just because the people have no experience that are conducting the studies,
Right.
right?
Experience. Yeah.
You know,
That makes sense. And I talked about this in I had a lecture I did, I think this was a while ago. This was probably 6 months or more ago, on why science-based training was highly overrated. And on my whiteboard I got behind me, I put a little chart, and it was like it can go these different directions, and it's like if they accurately represent the study, right? Like what they're saying in their video is what the study says. Even then, it might be a thing that's not that relevant to their training, right? It might not really matter that much. And if they're dishonestly representing it, which I suspect a lot of people would gladly misrepresent a study to sell a supplement or a program or an exercise.
oh,
I
it's
mean, they could end up contradicting themselves where you read the study, it says the opposite of what they said it said, or it's
absolutely.
just not relevant. So it can go wrong for a variety of reasons when you say, oh, here's what I have to say. It's backed by study.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And there's so much cherry picking going on, and there's so much data fudging going on. I'm sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, my background in biology just tells you that, you can work the data to prove your point
Yeah.
just about every time. It's just a matter how you work the data,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
it's meaningless. It's
Yeah.
because you've already corrupted the data.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a trend that I don't like. We can get into some more trends if you'd like. This would be very
Sure.
this will be probably the spiciest part of the podcast. I'm excited, man.
Yeah.
But there's this one on the topic of science. There's this guy who promotes, maybe you've heard of it, nucleus overload training.
Nucleus overload.
Nucleus overload. So the idea is that these fitness guys, this one in particular, and that science, which I'll get into why he's wrong about it, but he's basically claiming that it's the science is down to a cellular level with this exercise stuff where if you train with high frequency, you overload the nucleus and then get more nuclei and then satellite cells, and this is somehow going to enhance the muscle growth. So he literally is claiming that you can train a particular way for the sake of nuclear addition in your muscle fibers, which is so just insane when you think about it. It's like, oh yeah, this is my program to overload my nuclei. It doesn't pass a smell test, right, for being BS. But then even when you click on the scientific articles that this guy, 3D Team 3D Alpha, yeah, Team 3D Alpha, and the problem is that he's loved by many. He's loved by many people, even I respect, that haven't perhaps taken the time to go into why he's wrong in the studies, and they think this guy's just like a noble natty hero, but he's not. He's one of the villains. He's lying about these studies.
Yeah.
These studies are just talking about how muscle memory, right? So when you train, you do acquire new nuclei in the muscle fiber cells, but when you stop training, they don't go away. The nuclei is retained, despite the fact that the muscles atrophy, which is
Yeah.
expected to be part of the mechanism as to why muscle memory allows you to bounce back quicker. So he's quoting from studies that are talking about a completely different subject and saying,
Right.
look, guys, you can target nuclei overload. All you have to do is train 5 days in a row, the same muscle in 5 sets and all this stuff. And Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's gotten a lot of people hurt with those training methods, but I suspect there's kids spinning their wheels where, sure, if you do something 5 days in a row, that's hard. And if you
Yeah.
do it even light 5 days in a row, if that's harder than your little sissy program, you're going to say, I made gains. I made so many gains from nucleus overload, but you were
Yeah.
just working harder. You weren't doing anything magic, right? So,
Yeah. 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 Jeez. That sounds like he's really, really special, but um, I have said before that frequency for me is big. For me, frequency is more important than say tons of volume.
right.
Um, what really blew up my legs because when I was bodybuilding, you had leg day once a week, then you had chest and bicep, you had back and shoulders, you had triceps or right. So it was all the splits. When I started training with the Highland Games, um, I I knew I had to get my lower body bigger and stronger.
Yeah, no
So
doubt.
so I started squatting, sort of a leg day every day, right? But it wasn't every day. It was like 3 times a week. I still squat or train lower body 3 times a week,
Yes,
but it's not the same movement. I don't back squat 3 days a week. I
right.
might back squat Monday, front squat Tuesday or Wednesday, and do overhead squats or something, some lower body movement on Friday. So breaking up the leg days into sections allowed me to recover faster. And let's face it, I mean, the more you do something, right, you're gonna get better at it. The better you get at it, the bigger you're going to get. I mean, that's so. So for me, it was just a matter of managing pain, right? The muscle
Mm,
soreness, not injury, but muscle soreness.
right.
So I mean, that's where I would vary reps and sets and that kind of stuff, right? So, um, yeah, but but nucleus overload, man. I mean, it's just man, it's just I mean, it's just too out there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not that difficult. I mean, it doesn't have to be that freaking difficult. And I think that's where people get so confused today when it was just a lot simpler when I was learning,
yeah.
because you didn't have somebody coming at you from all directions with varying ideas and don't do this but do this. Oh, this is proved by that. This isn't proved. This is BS. Man, yeah, it's crazy.
And that guy's videos are a classic example of like intellectual sleight of hand where it's always like PowerPoint presentations,
Oh
lots
yeah,
of slides, lots of stuff, and you're going through quick. And if you're just some dumb kid who doesn't know anything and you're watching this, you're like, wow, he's put so much work into this presentation. But I mean, to say that he's ripping things out of studies out of their context would be like an understatement.
yeah,
There was even Coach Greg called him out. This was an example of Coach Greg doing something right. He made a video response to one of his videos and was like, "Hey, you were talking about a program for training 5 days a week, and you were using a study that just simply used a 3 day a week frequency. So you're trying to say, oh, look at this to back up my program,
yeah,
completely different." And he even put on the screen that paragraph from the study, but it's on the screen quickly and then it's gone. So if someone's
yeah.
just watching, they're not going to read the whole scientific jargon. But if you just pause, you go, "That's not what that says, buddy."
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and that's the
blatant.
thing is that these guys will impress the younger people with these big words. Oh man, this guy is so smart. He just look at all the big words he's using. He must be right. No. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So what are some other trends you'd like to tear into today? By all means, the floor is yours.
Oh man, jeez,
Yeah.
there's so many. I don't even know where to start. Yeah, I sent you that little. I mean, certainly science, right? And the squat no longer being the squat. I mean, where else? Oh, geez, let's talk about the Larson press.
Okay. Okay. Good. This will be a spicy
Yeah,
one. This will be a spicy one.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry to all, to any Bald Omni Man follower, supporter, lover out there.
Looking at one right here.
Yeah. The Larson press needs to die, man. It needs to die. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And to get back, and this gets back to where people no longer know how to bench press anymore. Just like people no longer know how to squat anymore.
Right.
People don't know how to bench anymore because of the leg drive issue. So now you have to add an extra exercise to build your chest. And lo and behold, here comes the Larson press, right? And I mean, if anybody knows, why the Larson press came about, it's because of Adrian Larson, right? The guy had no legs. I mean, right? He can't use his legs, right? So, but that's the thing. I mean, so the bench press has now become a terrible exercise to build your pecs because it's all about moving weight. How much weight can you move? How big of an arch can you get? How high can you lift your ass off the bench? How much leg drive can you use? And now we can't build our pecs because it's no longer a pec exercise. Sorry, guys, but yeah, the Larson press. Yeah.
Larson press, get out of here. Rest in peace.
Yeah. Just learn how to bench press properly.
I will say the Larson press, coming at it from someone who didn't know that much about benching, even in the last few years, it does give you a good, pec pump if you do it. If you do it with control, t-shirt touch, but then again, so does any other bench, right? If you do it right. And what I discovered too is, hey, if I'm pushing so hard with my legs, that lower back recovery, that's one way I've heard it described too from Bald Omni Man and others. It's like a spare your lower back. You got heavy squats, heavy deads, heavy bench, spare your back, just make it impossible for you to use leg drive, get those legs out of there. Okay, fair enough, but if I'm squeezing so hard that I'm getting lower back cramps and stuff, maybe I should just squeeze less hard with my legs. And now when I do pause bench, my joints feel better from doing the pauses. I think my chest is getting bigger from the pauses. The pauses seem to be really cleaning up my rep quality. Feels good, and I just deliberately make sure, okay, that bum stays on the bench. Never again am I going to do bench press where my bum lifts up. So, yeah, in a sense, I'm with you. I'm with you actually on that one. I don't really see it being necessary for anything, to be honest.
No. And I will say that I think last week I did do the Larson press. I mean, I'm trying, it's like I said, do all the exercises, right?
Yeah.
So I did do Larson press last week because my core and my lower back were so destroyed from throwing hammer that extending my legs took the pain off my lower back. Right?
There we go.
But
you wouldn't do a whole program on Larson press?
No, never.
No. Okay, right on.
Never. I think it's one of those things that somebody did because they needed to do, like Adrian Larson.
Yeah, in his case, yeah.
And then it's morphed into this, this gimmicky exercise that and everybody loves the Larson press. Everybody loves the Larson press. Nobody loves normal freaking bench press. Right? It's like drop the bench press because it doesn't build your pecs. But you know what builds your pecs? Larson press.
Yeah, I haven't done a Larson press in months. I'm just gonna keep hammering good old fashioned pause bench. Seems to be working just fine. Yeah.
Do your benches, man. Do your benches. If I didn't need it, then I wouldn't take it. But yeah, I laughed, man. Just that whole Coach Greg. I needed it. The key health is so horrible.
Yeah. The guy sells probably 100,000 cookbooks, and he wants you and I, as his fellow citizens, to pay for his TRT because he destroyed himself with steroids.
Exactly. Yeah, my tax dollars, are going to pay for your prescription right now.
Yeah, and it's all gone. Thanks, Greg. You used it up for everyone else who needed it for a medical reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the hilarious thing is that he had the big ball of G-test right behind his head, like his own test booster. But it's because you're there that.
Yeah.
What, Greg? It doesn't work? Wow, what a shock! It doesn't work.
Well, it's like irony is a literary device that writes itself sometimes, eh?
I know.
Goodness.
Absolutely.
Just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a case that I heard where a guy got, this would be a good example of what I would support TRT. A guy got hit in the head so hard that it actually damaged his pituitary gland and his nards just stopped producing it. That's an extreme case, but okay, I guess it's better for him to have testosterone than not,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got I've got a buddy who's got medically low T. That lifts, but he has medically low T, and it's got nothing to do with taking
steroids.
So I told him, geez, man. I mean, by all means. I mean, if it's going to improve your quality of life, then take it.
Do you know Vitruvian Physique, another Canadian YouTuber?
I know of him. I didn't realize he was Canadian, but I know of him.
Yeah. He's must be in his early 30s or just around 30, and after his bodybuilding show, he gets blood work done when he's all shredded, right? He looked great, but and then he makes this video, oh guys, I might go on TRT, and then he changes the title because he gets ratioed into oblivion. Because people are like, what are you talking about going on TRT? You just did a bodybuilding show. Of course you crashed your own testosterone. It's going to come back when you gain some fat. Like, what are you talking about? So I think there's that temptation for influencers to make it sound like they have a medical reason, but reality is they're just trying to be jacked to compete with the fake natties, I think, a lot of these guys.
Oh, of course. And that's the problem with social media anyway. You have guys like Natty Limits who say, men the age of, I can't remember, 40, 50.
Yeah.
Every guy over a certain age should consider TRT. Just you should
just flat out. Yeah.
Whether you're healthy or not, you should look into it.
What I couldn't imagine the scandal in my own mind of thinking I destroyed my own hormonal profile so bad that I have to live on exogenous hormones for the rest of my life. I never want that thought living in my head. I was like, I did that to myself. I want to be like you and just eat right and lift. Yeah.
And I think that, squatting, it's certainly doing all the squats, the heavy squats over the years has helped maintain my, strength is built from the ground up, man. I mean, that's the fountain of youth. The first thing to go are your legs. So you want massive legs. Right? Build massive legs. If you have big legs, you get everything else grows.
Yep. And with the whole age thing, it's such a cope. Menno Henselman's, I think I remember that video. He said even, oh yeah, whenever I'm 40, I'm gonna jump right on it myself. Like he was just ready to go. He's convinced.
Exactly.
Science. Yeah.
Exactly. Before any blood work or anything. If I'm 40,
Oh yeah, it's time to go.
And here in Canada, whether you want to do that or not, it's virtually impossible. I mean, you have to have an extreme low medical testosterone before you'll even consider it, right? Oh, man.
But I have on the extreme end of things, as far as Natty, my oldest client, he's 94 years old. 94 years old. And he's lifting, and the guy is a retired mechanical engineer, and he's actually working with a professor who's at McGill University. The two of them write scientific papers, so he's still active physically and mentally, contributing to scientific papers. So his training's real simple, but I mean, the guy is 94, but he gets in like his 7,000 steps a day. He's got shoulder arthritis, and it's taken him months of whether it's presses or different motions, but he's seeing it now as the months go by. My pain's not there. I can reach across and scrub my armpit without that sharp pain in my shoulder anymore. So even at his age, you can snail pace your way to being better at 94 as a man. So forget about TRT, folks. Forget about it.
And the fact that he still has his full mental capacity at 94 is amazing.
Oh yeah, he's sharp.
Good, man.
Adam's thoughts on muscle mommies. This will be good. Monkey bars every day. If you're listening, plug your ears, buddy. Here you go.
Look, I have nothing against women being in shape. I mean, I'm helping my wife in the gym right now, but this whole muscle mommy trend, which is really fueled by drugs. in itself. All these muscle mommy, pulling 450 pound, 550 pound dumbbell. Pilates for creatine heavy weights. No, you're dropping Pilates for animals.
When I went to college at George Brown in Toronto, there was a woman in the program who I want to say was probably in her 30s. She had the voice, like the man voice from whatever she was blasting, and she was big. Like she had a nice physique, like a physique that a guy with 5-10 years of training would try and work hard for. And she had that manly voice, and even her face kind of had the look enough where you went, that's a woman, but she's on something. It's pretty obvious. Yeah.
No, I mean, I certainly think all women should, lift and exercise for sure. But
I think so too.
This whole muscle mommy training, which are, I mean, it just, it just fuels the expectations of women jumping on male hormones, right? To go to the gym.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw something too. I don't know if this was from a study or what, but there's actually a really high percentage of women that when they try and do like a maximal lift, especially something like a deadlift or a squat, there's a really high chance they'll pee their pants. So it's like there's little things about men and women that are different, that not enough to say, oh, here's how you should train like a woman, but I mean there are genuine things you should consider. Your hips are not the same as a man's, and your upper body strength is going to lag behind even more than ours lags behind our legs. So, we can't just throw them in and expect them to be like a man, but at the same time, I would be remiss to say that women shouldn't lift heavy. I think it's phenomenal for women to lift heavy, or just lift in general, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there were lots of women that lifted in the 90s, right? Lots of women in the early 2000s, right? I mean, there's always been women bodybuilders, but we've always known that they've all been on drugs, right? The Olympians, all those. And like a decade ago, nobody talked about the steroids. And now you can find YouTube after YouTube video of my cycle, exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And it just seems like most women are turning towards drugs. It's just like it's recreation. That's all steroids.
Yeah. Maybe there's a sense where it's like the women feel a need to compete with the men, and there's some men who like women going to the gym because they like looking at them in their pants, or they whatever it is, right? There's positive reasons for men and women both to be in good shape, but if it's not a cooperative kind of healthy thing where you understand we're not one to one the same, but it's a weird dynamic to say women shouldn't be like this, but then also for women to be trying to show off and compete with men, I think that's also stupid, right? Like it can go either way. Yeah,
and people that, I mean, even online you hear people talk about steroids as being healthy, right? I mean, steroids are healthy.
No,
of course not. Right? I mean, geez. But another thing too. The muscle mommies are all half naked in all of the videos. Right? So don't objectify me, but at the same time, I'm half naked. No one needs to be half naked in the gym. Nobody.
Little modesty goes a long way, folks, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
You see my videos. I work out in like a t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah, man. Your socks, feet, and jeans.
On a cement floor doing front squats.
I know.
It's good.
Yeah.
But that's a good topic to finish up on what you just touched on, where it was like all this information to the whole drug use side of things being exposed. And there's very interesting dynamics in society where people say, okay, maybe we can all agree drugs are not the best thing in the world. You don't want your kids on hard drugs. Is it better to have drugs legal and educate people? Is it better to punish them severely? What does that look like? Times the test, I guess. But what do you think the consequences will be of all this talking about steroids? Are you someone that says the education that comes from it will be good because it'll keep people away? Or do you think it's sort of a, curiosity killed the cat? Now that kids know about it, they're more likely to be interested. What do you think will come from all this steroid talk?
No, I think at the end of the day, people are people, and they're going to do what they want to do. You can you can lead a horse to water and drinks,
Yeah.
and they're gonna do what they want to do anyway. That's the thing. You can give a little bit of education to help them along the way, but they're still gonna do what they want to do. Man, crazy.
We could do this all day, folks. There's so many trends that could be ripped into.
We could. I know. It's endless. Yeah.
Do you have any final tips or takeaway messages you'd like to leave to people to help them on their path to do the right thing?
Yeah. Have lots of sex. Lift heavy weights. No. Yeah.
Can't argue with that.
I mean, it's like, be careful who you put your trust in, and that's the problem with social media. Is that there's you don't know who provides the best information, and that's why I tend to not follow large channels, right? I follow small channels. They're the ones who are going to find all the honest information. All the hard-working people are on the smaller channels. So if anybody's out there who's new, who's looking for information, follow the smaller channels. Keep things simple. Eat. I mean, geez, like you said, we can go on forever. Bulking, cutting, right? Next time. But
oh yeah, we can rip into whatever main gaining, all that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, that's a good method. I agree that the smaller channels have the better information typically. Big time.
Yeah, they're the most honest. High quality. They might not have all the bells and whistles, all the top editing and all that stuff, but they've got, in my opinion, they have the best information. Avoid the gimmicks, right? And you're going to find all the gimmicks on the larger channels.
So true.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Where can people find you, Adam?
SAS Athletics on YouTube, and I'm also on Instagram. So,
I've been starving Adam to get him all shredded.
Yes, Davin the diet pusher. That's right. Ways, like I said, stick to the basics. To try true exercises. Eat to train. Don't worry so much about what's in the mirror.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed today's episode, and I hope our audience did as well. Yeah. Awesome.
Had a blast.
All right, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Folks, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, like, comment, share this video, and subscribe to the channel, as well as subscribe to Adam, and we'll see you guys in the next one.